I think that secondly, I have a very strong academic background. We'll be able to pull together our faculty, our staff, to work together in not only the implementation of higher education reform, but this transformation that I believe is taking place in education and higher education. I think that the interest that I have in teaching and in the use of technology and instruction will play a critical role in moving forward in our programming and in our establishment of priorities. So I think those would be the key reasons why I believe that I would be well positioned to be the next president of Western.
Dr. Ramsey, one of the trends with higher education reform is to find programs of excellence.
Right.
What role would a new president play in determining that?
I think that's an interesting question, and I think there's a lot of debate as to how much of that process is internally driven by the campus community and how much of that process is driven by the needs of our business community. And I think that what we've got to do is come up with a process that really is sensitive to and reflects both of those processes. I think campus-wide involvement is absolutely critical. Stephen Covey says, no involvement, no commitment. I think that we've been through a lot of planning processes where we've planned, but it's been at the administrative level and has not included a lot of the campus community and input from the campus community. So I think we have to have that involvement, but at the same time, I believe we need to be sensitive to the demands of the Commonwealth and to our region. So I think the role of the president is to be the ignition, to be the spark, to pull all that together. As I said to the group of community leaders this morning, I don't have all the answers, and I don't think you want me to have all the answers. I think that there are too many stakeholders in defining the path that we take. And so I think the president's role is to be the ignition, to provide the guidance, to provide the vision, to make sure that we think big enough. Again, I mentioned to the group this morning that one of the areas, Dan, that we're working on now is this concept of the Commonwealth Virtual University. And my challenge to Dr. Birch and to Chuck Anderson is let's think bigger. We've got a unique opportunity in terms of timing, and let's not miss that opportunity. So I think those would be the critical positions that the president needs to take.
What would be your vision and some of what you can elaborate a little bit on your prior answers? What is your vision for Western if you were president?
I'd like for it to be said that Western was the leader, not a leader, but the leader in the higher education reform movement, that we were out front in establishing programs of distinction. We're out front in focus on academic excellence. I don't want it to ever be said that any of our students are disadvantaged when they graduate from Western in the job market because of their Western diploma or Western degree. I want us to provide access. I want us to take a lead in things, concepts, and again, I don't believe the Commonwealth Virtual University is a panacea, but in concepts like the Commonwealth Virtual University and providing access to people who have not had access in the past. So, you know, my vision and dream is a Western that's greater than it is now, and that is very definitely in a leadership role, the leadership role in Kentucky in the years as we move forward.
Dr. Ramsey, with the fact that you've been here 5 years now and kind of know the inner workings and things that are going on in the university, do you feel like that gives you a little bit of an advantage?
I think it gives me a definite advantage. I've been here, know the faculty, I've taught here, know the faculty, staff, administration, know some of the real pluses of Western, know some of the areas that we need to shore up and be stronger. I think that I know a lot of the community. I think I am familiar with a lot of our graduates, a lot of people throughout the state. And I think for us to really be successful, we got to pull all that together. This is not the job of one person or just a small group of people, but for us to be successful, we need to take all the talent and resources and the people who have a really deep devotion and commitment to this institution and pull us all together. and get us all as much as we can on the same page, moving in the same direction. So I think that my experience here, my experiences throughout the state would be a huge advantage.
If you were president, would you look at athletics in a little different light? I know there's a lot of talk, a lot of people would like to see Western maybe go back to the Ohio Valley Conference as a full-fledged member. Is that something that would be explored?
Western Kentucky University has a rich athletic tradition, an athletic tradition that's been very important to this community, to many of our alumni, a tradition that has been important over time to our students. I sense, Todd, that maybe the importance of the athletic program to all those constituencies perhaps not as great today as it has been at one point. I think that we're at an interesting point in time because, as you're aware, there are efforts being made at this time to begin a study. And I think that my approach would be to go through that study in a very factual way, because there are very strong emotions on this issue. There's nobody in the middle. Everybody feels strongly one way or the other way. And we need to do the research and analysis and have the facts. We need to understand where athletics fits into our future, into our strategic plan. We need to understand how important athletics is to fundraising and potential fundraising. I have told the story before of the director of the foundation at Indiana University saying that at IU, and I understand we're not IU when it comes to our athletic program in many areas, but the president of the foundation at Indiana University said that he made no apologies for their athletics program, and the fact that most first-time givers to the university gave to athletics. And once they gave to athletics, then IU had their name, they had data, they put them in their database, and then they could begin to pursue gifts to the academic mission of the institution. And I don't remember the statistics, Todd, but the president of the foundation talked about, and I was impressed with the fact that now more people who are first-time givers at IU give to academics than they do to athletics. So we need to understand how important can our athletic program be to our fundraising, to the rebuilding of our relationship with our alumni, to student recruitment. And a lot of that information's out there. We're not going to be reinventing the wheel. But this is an issue that's on the table. I think we have to let the process work its way through. I'm very hopeful that the board will be very committed to taking a very open and honest view of this issue and putting the facts on the table. I think the worst thing we can do is sort of go along every year and not know where athletics fits into the strategic plan of the university. I think we need to address that decision and to make that decision. I would also say that I think that accountability in athletics is as important as accountability in any other program on campus, and that every dollar that of state dollars or any dollars that are put into the athletics program, we need to ensure the accountability of those funds and ensure that we're purchasing with those dollars the things that we're attempting to purchase with those dollars.
Your background, as I understand it, is a little weak on fundraising. Maybe you haven't had to do fundraising, be a fundraiser. I guess I have a two-part question. What do you say to people who might say you have a weak background in fundraising? And the second part is, how does that, where is that in terms of what strength you might have as political connections, your relationship maybe with the governor?
Okay. Well, that's an interesting question. I'll try to see if I can dissect that. First of all, I have every confidence that we will be successful in our fundraising efforts. I think fundraising is important, and that the private dollars can be help us achieve the margin of excellence that we seek. We're at an interesting point, I think, in terms of our going forward. In terms of fundraising, we've made some commitments to staffing, we've made commitments, and now we have to follow through on those commitments in terms of fundraising. I think the point that we're at, Cynthia, is that what we have to do is we have to go out and enthusiastically convince our friends and our potential donors that they want to invest in Western Kentucky University. We've got to get over the mentality that has existed here that Western's a good place to write a check to for a tax deduction, but we're not a charity. We're an institution with needs, but we're not asking people to give to those needs. We're asking people to help us find solutions where we can meet the needs of this Commonwealth. And so we're at a point where we need to be able to convince people to invest in Western Kentucky University, and when people invest in anything, whether it's a mutual fund, a stock, a bond, they want to be assured that they'll get a rate of return on that investment. And that rate of return will be the quality programs and the academic excellence that we'll achieve. So I feel very strongly that there are many components to fundraising, and what I'll bring to it is the credibility that the investor in Western Kentucky University is going to get a solid return on their dollar. Well, I hope so. But this is an area that I feel very strongly about. I have a great deal of comfort in meeting with the types of people that we need to be meeting with. We've already started that over the last several months, making visits to people who can be very critical to our fundraising effort. We have a good team in place. My management style is to rely on that team and to have them use me where I can be most effective. But we will be successful in fundraising. Again, this is another area where we need the full support and full commitment of our Board of Regents. And we need the board at our quarterly meetings to ask us, how are you doing in fundraising? Where are we in fundraising? We haven't had enough of that in the past. In terms of the governor and my relationship, I think that's pretty well understood. The governor is committed to the long-term future of this state. The governor believes that higher education has been too parochial in the past. There have been too many regional interests. And so I think what I bring is the opportunity to talk with the governor and to talk with the governor's staff and to communicate to them on higher education and the needs of higher education and the needs of Western. I don't think there's any question, though, that the governor's always going to do what he thinks is in the Commonwealth's best long-term interest. But I do not see Western's best interest and the Commonwealth's best interest as being two separate things. So certainly that's a relationship that is strong. We need to remember that there are other pieces to this process in Frankfort. It's just not knowing the governor. 20 years ago, you could go into the governor's office and shake hands and come out with an understanding. But there's a legislative process that's very important, and we have to build and rebuild our relationship through the legislative process. There are a lot of new legislators in the General Assembly, and a lot of new legislators in our area, through our service area. And we need to build our relationships with them. And then the Council on Post-Secondary Education is going to be a very important player. New council, new members, hopefully a new day, a new direction for the council. And we need to be involved in having strong relationships with the council. So we can also be very successful in that in those efforts.
Time for one more question.
Dr. Ramsey, if you become the next president, what's the first problem or issue you're going to address?
Well, that's an interesting question, and I really don't know the answer to that. I've always thought it'd be a little presumptuous of me to think that I would get to that point. But there are some symbolic things that I would like to do, and some of them are very small, but there are a lot of symbolic things that I'd like to do in terms of the alumni magazine and just terms of messages that we send. But in terms of substantive things, again, my three focuses would be, one, to start immediately on giving us a clear focus and understanding of where we're headed, and that's going to involve revisiting our planning process and tying our planning process to our financial management process. Secondly, rebuilding our sense of family on campus, and thirdly, doing what we were just talking about with Cynthia, building our external relationships, not just with the elected leadership of the state, but with our alumni, with the teachers, principals, counselors in the state, with our community, and with our friends. There are many people who are not graduates of Western, many people who are not in the General Assembly, who are not community leaders in this community, but people who care a great deal about this institution. And I think if we can build those relationships, we will be successful in fundraising. So that's, you know, again, not a real direct, blunt answer to your question, but there are some symbolic types of things that I think need to occur quickly, and then we've got a lot of work to do.
Can we ask Ms. Ramsey a question? What role would you have in his administration? What would you see your role be?
Well, I think to attend campus events and to help with the entertaining, such as fundraising and what other entertaining needs to be done, and to try to take care of things at home so he can do his job here.
Thank you.
Well, sir, why would you be the best president for Western in this particular point in its history?
Well, this is a critical time in Western's history, not only with a number of important planning documents currently at work, but certainly for higher education and in this state with the Education Reform Act that's that has just passed in the called session. It's an important time. I would welcome the opportunity to lead Western through the next several years of transition. I think Western is poised to select its academic strengths and move toward a level of national prominence in selected academic areas, and would welcome the opportunity to coordinate the planning elements that can bring that about. A strong board, strong faculty, an alumnus that has a history of support and enthusiasm, and a campus with character. There are a lot of reasons why Western's ready to make a move, and we grew up here. The last few years we've been away at other good universities getting the experience necessary to come back and lead Western.
As a drawing on your experience in fundraising, are there some things that you would hope to have Western specifically in that area?
There's no question Western is ready to conduct a capital campaign. Well, I don't know how ready it is, but the timing is necessary that Western conduct a capital campaign. One of the first things we would do would have to be to assess strengths and weaknesses in the fundraising program. But certainly in the first few years, the proper planning and implementation of a capital campaign would be in order. And that's something that I would see as a challenge to increase the $53 million we're currently getting from the state, to try to hold the line on the $30 million the students are currently contributing through tuition and fees, but dramatically increase the level of support from the private sector in order to provide that margin that's needed for our faculty to do what they do best. So I would project that a capital campaign will be in Clemson's future. Clemson's, yes. Western's future. Well, that's the first time that one's happened.
Do you think that since you already have experience not only in fundraising but with this particular institution, it's going to help you move further?
Oh, no question. That's something. That's a strength that I would bring. Now, that's not the only strength, and that's a presence in Frankfurt and coordinating the planning elements and creating a collaboration with the city of Bowling Green. A lot of demands for the president's time, but that's a strength that I would bring, and we would place great emphasis on that.
Dr. Ransford, with all the changes in higher education reform, where would you see Western's role?
Well, I'm not sure I'm the best prepared to project that role at this point until I would have a chance to meet with the new Council on Post-Secondary Education, to certainly communicate with the governor and earn the confidence of the governor and his staff and others in Frankfurt. But I do know that there's a window of opportunity that's open as we head into the biennial session, which, as I understand, is short 30 days this spring. There's an important legislative agenda that would need to be designed, and we would need to project those opportunities to seize at least 4 of the 6 investment and incentive funds that have been created through the Education Improvement Act, the Post-Secondary Education Improvement Act. Where we fit within those 4 funding opportunities and where we fit philosophically with the Council on Post-Secondary Education would need prompt and close review. the mission of Western would have to be reviewed and to ensure that we're in concert with that council and what they envision for the higher education landscape in this state. So that would take prompt and immediate due diligence to assess that. I don't know that that would be that I would be equipped at this point to state specifically what that relationship would be, what our mission would be needed. A review would be needed.
What do you think of Western Kentucky University? If you were to tell somebody else about Western, what would you tell them about Western? What is the school?
Historical strength for quality teaching and a strong faculty, strength in the liberal arts, a tradition of excellence in education-related disciplines. I guess since my degree was in communications, I'd have to put that one in as well. A character of campus, a history of warm faculty-student relationships. Western is unique to have a number of variables that I would consider important to treasure and preserve in terms of things unique to this campus, with its founding and its history with Ogden and Potter and the Bowling Green Business University. Those institutions that have come to be part of this institution. The Red Towel, Henry Hardin Cherry, Ed Diddle. There are a lot of things, Big Red more recently, which I'm proud of because I had a hand in starting Big Red. But there are a lot of things that are unique, may not be too strong a word, to this campus and important to the Western experience, and we would work hard to preserve those things and indeed work hard to identify new things that can continue to enhance that Western experience. Those are the things that I would describe as that makes this place special to our students, faculty, alumni, and those who live in the area.
Where do you see the future of Western athletics?
Well, I would first have to assess the future of our academic strengths. Our first priority will be academic quality, strength of curriculum, faculty, and students. And secondly, we would then build those things that do enhance that Western experience that I just described, athletics being one of them. I would hope that we would build our primary academic programs, which would be identified, to a point where we would aspire to have our athletic program equal that excellence that we would achieve in the classroom. I'm a very competitive person. I get pretty excited at Western athletic events and have for a long time. I've seen the best of Western athletics when I was a student and an employee on 2 occasions, and I've seen some decline. I've seen attendance from a distance drop a bit in the last 10 or 15 years. Athletics are important. They create enthusiasm. They create campus self-esteem. They create campus momentum. They are important to students, to community residents, and even to faculty. So it's something we would want to build, but in the proper order and with the proper allocation of resources given our priorities for academic excellence. The public is watching closely intercollegiate athletics, and we at Western will be part of the solution and not part of the problem.
Would you see Western staying where it currently is in athletics as far as conferences go, or would you rather see it be more of a regionalized type of conference?
I'd probably have to talk with Lou and find out exactly where he sees us being at this point in time. I'm not sure I can fully assess where we are. I know the Sun Belt is something different than it was when Western got in the Sun Belt when Clem was coaching. And Clem and I have been friends for years. And I'm not sure. Well, I would just have to talk with people more closely related to that conference and that program now to see if that's where our future is. I understand football, we're back in the OVC and as of just in the last few months. That's a good move, I would project, in terms of the identity of people who live in the state who may not be alumni, but who might be potential fans. And as we seek to fill Diddle Arena, or in that case Smith Stadium, that has potential. In terms of the other sports, I have not had a chance to assess budgets, what we spend on travel, what type of draw we get from other institutions in the Sun Belt. I expect it's fairly lean. All those things would need to be assessed in the total context of a financial profile, and as we look to dedicate new resources and certainly reallocate existing resources, that's all part of the mix.
Ramsey, I understand you were in charge of maintenance, campus-wide maintenance.
Facilities is one of the areas that reports to me at Clemson, that's correct.
One of the challenges here several years ago trying to deal with deferred maintenance in light of budget cuts. Is there some experience that you can bring from Clemson that would help address that problem?
Well, I would hope so. We've just finished a campus tour with Dr. Birch, and as we look across the campus, it's easy to remember the times when we would walk across campus dating and the good times we had here, and the care which Presidents Thompson and Downing had, the concern, the passion they had for the physical place. And there's been some deterioration of some of that campus green and the quality that we remember in some of our buildings, and that deferred maintenance inventory is significant. That's been a great emphasis at Clemson University in the last few years since I've been responsible for our maintenance operations. We've begun to chip away at our deferred maintenance inventory. In the 10 years I've been there, we've built 10 buildings, each of which bears the name of the principal benefactor to that building, with a 25% construction cost requirement to name a building for a benefactor. So we've used a combination of public and private sources to upgrade the physical plant, and now that we've stabilized the budget, we're beginning to redirect resources to deferred maintenance and solve some infrastructure problems. We're building a new power plant. So and understand that heating and cooling is a major problem in many of the buildings, and in fact some residence halls still don't have air conditioning. So do I know the formula right now to solve the problem? No. But do I have the experience to have at it? Yes, and would welcome the opportunity to explore how we can address some of those problems. But it won't all be done without reallocation of current budget. It will take some additional resources, public and private, to address the problem.
Dr. Ramsey here yesterday, one of the finalists. He has a prior experience in state government and worked with the legislature and so forth. You and the other three are coming in from other states. How do you counter his sort of inside knowledge of the legislature and getting more money, perhaps, and having governors in and so forth?
Well, I would hope that we would, if we are to move back to Bowling Green and I'm to become the president of Western, that we would take advantage of Jim's knowledge of state government and utilize his awareness to our benefit in our planning and implementation. But I've had for many years legislative relations at Clemson. We went through a reorganization a few years ago, and because of a number of new duties I took on campus, legislative relations was transferred to another officer of the university. But in the time that I had legislative relations, I have testified many times before the House and Senate on higher education issues. I've written legislation and seen it passed. There are 5 buildings that we had funded entirely through state bonds, 2 bond bills, and 3 others through state reserves. I know how to work the House and the Senate. I know how to work with the Ways and Means Committee and the Senate Finance Committee, or whatever the structure is here. That's something that is critical for Western, and something that I relish and would welcome the opportunity to establish a presence in Frankfurt and develop those relationships that are necessary. We do not have, as I don't believe, Western has a governmental affairs liaison, a staff position that is responsible for our relationship with the General Assembly, with state agencies, and we need to have a established, consistent presence in Frankfurt. I'll be there often, but that is something that we would need to assess. Too much is on the line. We get, as I said a moment ago, $53 million from the state, and that needs to be considerably more. That is holding steady, but it's really declining as a percent of the total institutional budget.
Are you saying that it's possible you can see a need for a staff position that would be a consistent thing where you come in and out as needed?
That's something that would need to be assessed. I understand that is a common phenomenon in higher education. Now, whether that's the highest priority for a position, I have no way of knowing. But I do know that you've got to maintain a consistent presence and go in with a legislative agenda that has a precise strategy for each legislative or appropriation objective you need to achieve. And there's also an opportunity each session to perhaps try to keep some things from happening that may not be in Western's best interest, that relates to higher education, or in some states the legislatures tend to get involved in some faculty issues of number of courses taught and tenure and those kinds of things. So there are times when we need to communicate important things other than just financial. So whether that's a position that needs to be filled or not, I don't know, but it's something that we'd have to assess.
One of the keys to higher education reform is to select programs of distinction.
Mm-hmm.
Universities, what if you could describe your management style, how you approach that, who should be involved in deciding which programs?
Certainly. Well, there are, as I see it, 4 building blocks currently in place. There's an institutional review that the board has commissioned that is begun modestly and will pick up steam and unfold over the next couple of months. That will set benchmarks, identify strengths and weaknesses, and that will be needed to combine with the new level plan that President Meredith furthered, and parts of it are beginning to unfold. The Western 21 strategic plan, while has a bit of age to it since 1991, did identify essential and desirable curricula throughout the campus. Those 3 things need to be used to mold right in with the Post-Secondary Education Improvement Act to allow us to define what those strengths are in order to take advantage of that legislative intent. And as those 4 elements come together, we can then define our vision and update our mission relevant to what the Council on Post-Secondary Education sees Western's mission to be. And then we can gain momentum and begin penetrating those investment and incentive funds that I spoke about a moment ago. So my strategy would be to bring the primary planning elements currently in place together to chart that course. The new level plan and the strategic plan are lacking specific actions, timelines, specific individuals accountable for achievement. So there's a lot of specificity and definition that's needed. But that's what we can bring about. They're ready for that next step, and that would be something that we would need to do certainly in the first year.
Last week, Governor Patton talked about the possibility that some programs that appear to be duplicated between various universities would be eliminated. Would that be the flip side of concentrating on your strengths, getting rid of programs that are considered to be weaker than other universities, allowing them to concentrate more on what you believe the university's mission really is?
Well, one of the things the Western 21 plan did was identify those areas that would be considered less of a priority than desirable or essential programs. So that's a start, although the list was rather short of those that were less desirable, I guess, and really didn't get into administrative areas much. I think the first thing we have to do is identify those things that are special, important, and potential strengths, or current or potential strengths for Western, that we need to protect as discussions of duplication unfold, and be well equipped to protect those as important to this university. And as we identify those things that may be more marginal, we would then know enough about the other institutions to know where they fit with strengths of other institutions, and be in a position to negotiate with resolve as the matter of duplication unfolds with the Council on Post-Secondary Education. Okay?
Well, we've been a team for an awful lot of years now, and would continue to do so. And I think that the president's wife can help by going to alumni meetings throughout the state and meeting the alumni, helping entertain. We've raised a lot of money at Clemson through a capital campaign, and you have to entertain corporations and possible donors, and that I can do well. I would expect to use the president's home frequently, open it up to student groups, faculty groups, you know, so that everybody is a part of the university. No one person is more important than another person. And I would expect to walk my dog through campus.
That's right, most important. Well, that's two questions. Let me try both of them. First of all, what attracted us to the position is we really do love Kentucky. We were at the University of Louisville for 11 years, and we really raised our family here in Kentucky. And so we have a real interest in the Commonwealth. Second part of that is that the governor's initiative to really take higher education in its totality, all of post-secondary education, and coordinate it and organize it for the best long-term interests of the citizens of the Commonwealth is an exciting possibility that we very much would like to be part of. The future of higher education and post-secondary education is tied to being able to meet our citizens' needs not just once, as we have traditionally done, but being able to meet those needs on a long-term basis. And Western Kentucky University is ideally situated to be a major player, not only for the Commonwealth of Kentucky, but this region of the country.
You're a candidate who is already how do you see what you need to do here at Western as being different from what you're already doing?
Well, there's a lot of similarities about the job, but the difference, the major difference, is that Kentucky is going to make a coordinated effort with all of its institutions, community colleges on through to its major research institutions, to meet the needs of the citizens. That is not happening in Kansas, and that is something I very much would like to be part of.
Why are you the best candidate to be president?
Well, I guess the only way to answer that, and I kind of did it this morning at the breakfast, if you're going to have heart surgery and you've got a real critical crossroads in terms of your medical treatment, you want a physician that's done that operation before. And I sense that Western Kentucky University and the Commonwealth is at a crossroads. And just like the governor wants the president of the Council on Post-Secondary Education to be a proven leader and a national figure, I think that it's important for the institutions to have proven leaders that have track records, and that's why I think I'm the best candidate for the position.
Dr. Hammond, one of the keys of higher education in Kentucky is to identify program distinction. As president of Western, how would you approach that from a management style? Who should be involved in deciding what programs you promote?
Well, I very much believe in an all-encompassing kind of consulting process, and at Fort Hays State we have a strategic planning process, and every single employee of the institution is involved and has the ability to put forward action plans that are then reviewed and evaluated. And we're encouraged to participate. We get some of our best ideas from people in the organizational structure that you would never think of and come up with good ideas, but they're great concepts. So we try to solicit the best ideas from everyone, pull those together, and then prioritize them and come up with a strategic plan that we can then move on in our budgeting and policy decisions.
How are you in the relationship with the legislature and the governor and so forth? What's your experience in that?
Well, the current governor of the state of Kansas is a friend of Viv and I's. In fact, we just got a letter from his wife, and I think if you called them and said they don't want us to go, there's a general feeling, I think, that we've been very, very effective with the legislature. We've been able to get their support in terms of our vision and dream for the university. And as a result, it's paid off. Our faculty salaries when we got there 10 years ago were the worst in the state in terms of peer comparison.
And we've gone from an average, at that time they were like on an average of $27,000, and now they're up over 40. We've increased them 48%. We wouldn't have been able to do that without the support of the legislature and the Board of Regents. And there's lots of other examples. They funded our nurse practitioner programs. They funded our new facilities. We were able to get new science facilities. We've been able just to get $15 million to deal with deferred maintenance problems. We're going to renovate current existing facilities with $15 million that the legislature's been able to provide us. So, and I've only got, 5,000 to 6,000 students, 5,800. We have a smaller operation, and so that's a tremendous amount of support. The legislature's been very supportive of Fort Hays State University.
Obviously, academics is number one in any institution. Where do you see athletics in the future of this, and where does that fit in the scheme of things?
Well, it's not academics, and it's not athletics. It's meeting the needs of the citizens of the state. And, so we'll try to meet those needs in whatever creative ways we can. Athletics plays a role in that it connects the alumni and your students to the institution. Now, you can argue whether that's the right way to connect, but it works. And I've been involved with athletic management now at 3 different institutions: Seton Hall, the University of Louisville, and Fort Hays. And the key, I think, in evaluating an athletic program is, are you getting a return on your investment? And, we set up a corporation at the University of Louisville, so we removed, over a period of years, removed all state money from the operations of athletics. And I was involved in the creation in the first few years management of that company, that corporation. When I left, I think we had $8 or $9 million profit as a result. We went to Fort Hays, different kind of situation, different kind of environment, and last year, out of I think 14 sports, 9 of them were ranked in the top 10 in the nation in their division. So I think that you can make it pay, and you can make the investment worthwhile, but you've got to manage it correctly. And if you're not getting a return on the investment, then you've got to make changes.
Can you see athletics here being self-supporting down the road?
I don't know enough about the athletic program. I've talked to the athletic director, who's going to try to meet with him tomorrow. Viv and I are going to stay an extra day and meet with people and try to find out some more about the institution. And we had a meeting, but unfortunately he isn't going to be back, so we're meeting with some of his staff. After that meeting, I may have a better idea. I don't have all the answers, and there are a lot of very competent people here that can provide us information and help design solutions to the challenges that face us. But every institution is facing the question, is the investment you make in intercollegiate athletics worth it? And that issue needs to be decided not only here, but every place. My experience is that if you manage it correctly and you have competitive programs, that investment is more than worth it. It impacts the amount of money you can collect privately, it impacts the level of student retention, and it impacts your student recruitment, all of which are critical for a successful university.
On the subject of private investment, what do you see as the keys to helping Western become better at getting private support?
Well, I'm not familiar with exactly what Western has been doing and what Fred's been trying to accomplish with it, but I do know, looking at the levels of resources that are now in the 2 endowment funds, 2 foundations, that for a school this size, it's tremendously underfunded in terms of its private support. I think there's some real opportunities out there that haven't been tapped. Same thing happened when I went to Fort Hays. Fort Hays hadn't raised $1 million for anything that it had ever tried to do before we got there. We raised $2.4 million for the Performing Arts Center. We turned around and raised $6 million in a separate campaign to computerize the campus. Then we did a $20 million capital campaign in which we raised about $23 to $24 million for a variety of things, library, athletic facilities, and a new museum for the Sternberg Holdings. So, I guess my experience has been, and my track record is I can raise money. And that's not a problem. How much we raise, how we raise it here, what we raise it for would be a matter of consulting with people, getting the faculty and the staff involved in setting those priorities.
would this be a greater priority even than, say, increasing the state fee for the university? The candidate who was here yesterday mentioned that the state really hasn't increased the allocation for the university in the last few years, and it's shrinking in proportion to the budget.
Well, I think you'll find that anywhere you go. I mean, we used to be state-supported institutions, and now we're state-assisted institutions. But I think the Commonwealth of Kentucky has funded higher education in a decent manner. It's not adequate. We could always use more money, but I don't think they've neglected higher education. And clearly the current governor and his current strategy is to invest in it. I think the governor and obviously the legislature, because they supported the reorganization and the reform, understand that the future of the Commonwealth of Kentucky is directly tied to the level of skill level in the workforce in the Commonwealth. And if we can organize all the institutions, the 2-year community colleges, the 4-year regionals, and the research institutions, if we can organize that into a coordinated effort, we can raise the skill level in the workforce in Kentucky and be a lot more attractive to business and industry. And that's a necessity. If we don't do it, other states are going to do it, and other communities are going to do it, and Kentucky will be behind. And that's the exciting thing about coming here at this time. We will really have the opportunity to make a difference to the citizens of this Commonwealth.
You talked about technology a little bit this morning, and I was wondering if you may be repeating yourself, but with higher ed reform, what does this mean for Western and technology that you were referring to this morning?
Well, this morning I talked about, the change in our environment and how extensive that change is. The old models of education are broken and are not going to work in the new century. I mean, we used to go to elementary school once, we'd go to high school once, and we'd go to college, and then we'd go practice whatever profession we wanted to pursue. And that isn't going to be possible any longer. Whole new careers will be developed, and whole new careers will disappear. And our educational institutions will need to respond to our citizens' needs, not just once, but 2 and 3 times in their lifetime. So Western's commitment to its graduates is to service them and other citizens not only while they're here, but after they leave here, so that they can continue to be major contributors to society, to the economy in the Commonwealth, and also for their businesses and their families. There's tremendous spin-off if we can accomplish that. Lifelong learning is a reality, and we've got to be prepared for it.
This morning, you talked a little bit about a 4-year guarantee that I thought was interesting that you have with students. Can you tell me what your part was in that and whether you could envision something like that for Western in the future?
Well, it was, I'd love to say I created the idea, but there are a couple of other schools around the country that have done it as well. What we saw was that when I went there, we wanted more of our students to graduate. I mean, it's a tremendous waste for students and families to spend money and not be able then to graduate. So we looked at it and we were able to get our graduation rates right now is almost 45%. Of the students that come will end up graduating, which is significantly better than it is here. But we can improve on that.
What did you say that percentage?
45% will end up getting degrees. Now, only about 20% they'll get degrees in 4 years. And another 23 or 24% were getting it in 5, 6, and 7 years when we looked at it. And that's a real waste. First of all, families, my family, when they planned to send me to school and let me go to college, I mean, they thought, well, we'll try to get enough money to send you for 4 years. And that's the way most parents think. And most degree programs should be able to be offered within 124 to 128 hours so that you can complete it within a 4-year time frame. What we did then is we said to students, if you come to our institution and you enter into this contract with us, which says that you'll take what your advisor is advising you to take, and you won't flunk any of those classes, and you'll have a major selected by the end of your freshman year, we will guarantee that you'll graduate in 4 years or we'll pay for the 5th year. Now, what that means is if the university doesn't advise correctly, or if we don't offer the courses in the right sequence, or whatever the case is, it shouldn't be your fault. And we've just had a tremendous response from students and from families in our state to that kind of progressive thinking in terms of the way we offer it. Our faculty like it too, because students have to be responsible. Students need to make decisions and stay the course. They can't be going around and dropping and adding courses the way some students do, or they'll automatically break the contract. And it's been a very effective tool for us to use, and we'll learn in a few years how it works out. It's going to take time to see what the impact is, but it's been very positive. It's been very well received to date.
Could you say something like that at Western then?
Yeah, I think that's possible if it's something that fits in what we need to do here with us. Just because it works one place, though, doesn't mean that it's a priority someplace else.
Mrs. Hammond, what would be your role if, as president's wife, what would you do?
Probably what I've been doing in the past, and that's to support whatever programs we feel are necessary. With the fundraising, we really try to do a lot of the entertaining, to meet people. If they can put a face with a name, it makes a big difference. I think we're all that way, if you can place a person. And so we like to get to know our alums. We get to know the legislators, especially those from Western Kansas. We meet with the faculty, with students. I'm very involved with a student group that is very much like the Spirit Masters here, and I enjoy that very much. We do have meetings with Ed's staff, the Director of University Relations, the Director of Alumni, the Executive Secretary, Ed and I, our assistant, to plan events, and we go out 3 months in advance, and every month we go, redo the first 2 and look ahead to see what we can do to complete the programs that are necessary. I don't make decisions. I just support.
I think she's doing a real vouch for her in some ways. I think if you talk to the people in Hayes, they'd say that she's a major part of our institution. She knows a lot of the students. A lot of the students come to her for help. She's kind of an adopted mother. We've kind of gotten rid of our 3. They've kind of moved on in their lives, and so it's not unusual for me to come home and find students in our house with Viv.
But the other thing I like to do is to get involved in the community. One of the regents last night said that she was a volunteer, and I suppose that would be my title. I'm involved with United Way and Special Olympics, and very involved with the Chamber as an ambassador. I'm on the Humane Society board, which is it's real close to my heart. All of our dogs at the Humane Society breed, and I like to get involved with the community.
Anything else?
Yes, I have a request to ask this question. What is your reaction to the tragedy at LSU?
Well, if you've seen my bio, you know that I'm chairman of National Collegiate Alcohol Awareness Week, which is coming up here in another month and a half, and I have been for about the last 12 years, and raise $500,000 every year from corporate America to try to help college students deal with the abuse of alcohol. I think alcohol abuse is maybe the number 1 or number 2 problem that we have to solve. If you look at what it does in terms of impacting graduation rates, impacting the success of students in class, impacting other problems relating to damage in dormitories and everything, it's a major issue. And I think a lot of higher education has not paid real good attention to it. I kind of got a kick this morning on the news about all the emphasis on binge drinking. I mean, we've known that for a long time, and it's time that we do something about it. And we need to take creative educational approaches to dealing with it. Telling students that they shouldn't drink isn't going to solve anything. We've tried that for years. We need to do creative programs like Bacchus's program and Gamma. There's a number of programs that have been very successful in helping college students.
Eugene Payne and his wife Karen. He's our final candidate to be interviewed for the presidency.
Could you tell me your names and where you are from or what you represent?
Stephanie Brabant, Daily News.
Okay, Stephanie, we've spoken.
Shane and I.
And we've spoken.
I'm Cindy Eagles with the Courier. I called you last week.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Robert.
Well, you know all the answers. Would you like to trade here?
Robert Patrick, WKCT Radio.
Mm-hmm.
Dan Modlin with Western's Public Radio.
Mm-hmm.
Barbara Marigsa, WBKO Television.
Okay.
best president for Western?
I believe that Western is at a really unique time. We're at a time, and a point in history, not only at Western, but in our country, where the economic development and the quality of life of a community is dependent strongly upon the communication and the cooperation between the business community and the university. I believe that my background in running substantial operations in both the business area and in the educational area qualifies me uniquely to lead this particular effort over the next several years.
If you become the new president of Western, what kind of goals do you have for Western? Do you have any plans that you're emphasizing?
Well, I think that a lot of the goals that I have seen develop for Western are very, very significant. They're very substantial, and there are a lot of good ideas. There's the plan, I think it's 22, is that correct? 21? 21. There was one that came out in what, 92? A few years ago, 92. And then there's a more recent one that was developed about a year or two ago that speaks about really more of an implementation. All of those have excellent, excellent ideas, especially the latter one. What has to happen now, though, is you have a general statement. How do you make all those things happen? There are a lot of organizations that set out very nice plans, and they put them on a shelf someplace, and nothing ever happens. The real challenge for Western now is to, I would say, first of all, is to have the faculty, the university community, and the business community reaffirm those goals, to go back in and get support from the bottom up, not just from the top down, but from the bottom up, to reaffirm those goals, probably modify them, and then put in place action plans for getting them accomplished. An action plan means that you've got to, sometimes we talk about goals, and goals are real fuzzy things. They're not very specific. If you're going to have real goals, they have to be very specific. The analogy is like if you're playing basketball or football, you know when you score a goal. And a goal has to have a definite end. You have to know when you get there. And those are the kind of things, the actual goals that need to be accomplished next year, the following year, over a specific period of time, like 5 years, need to be established. And we need to identify who's going to be responsible for achieving those goals. And as I said, the goals cannot come from the top down. They have to be developed really as a coordinated effort from all the people who are participating.
To be more specific about what those goals are?
Well, you have, have you read any of your own goals? There are goals for academic programs, defining which programs are going to be the peaks of excellence. That's very important to do. There are goals that deal with academic programs. For example, one that is very laudable says that we're going to have all of the students have a summary of their coursework within each course. I think there's a goal that perhaps was not in there, probably one that I inferred, and that is one to enhance the interaction between faculty and students. I think that is very important. We know in looking at students and talking to students and folks who have finished their academic careers and are farther along, when they look back on their own academic careers and you ask them, were they satisfied? There is a very high correlation between the satisfaction that one has in the academic program and the interaction that individual had with a faculty member. And I mean interaction on a personal basis, a one-on-one basis, a strong interaction, faculty research projects, small group discussion projects, all those kind of things are very, very important. And it flies in the face of something else you have to accomplish, and that's economies of scale. So that's difficult to do. I think it's a very important goal, and I think it's one that I would put up near the top of the list.
Dr. Payne, as you may know, in higher education in Kentucky, one of the key challenges is going to be identifying programs of distinction, academic programs.
Mm-hmm.
Could you tell us about your management style and how you would address that concern at Western? Who would be involved in that?
Well, my management style, the short description of my management style is I work for the development and the empowerment of people, and then hold them accountable for achieving the goals which they help to set. That is as short and as concise as I can state my own management style. Now, you referred back to the programs. The university community, and I think it's also important to have the business community, need to be involved in jointly defining what are the key programs for the institution.
The other candidates talked about how they work with the state legislature and governor and so forth. What has been your relationship in the vice presidential post that you've had in working with the state governments?
I spent about 15 years as vice president for finance and administration for two different institutions. The first institution was Southwest Texas State University, which is an institution very much like Western. As a matter of fact, I've commented and talked to a number of folks today that it's rather interesting because the alumni magazine is called Hill Views, and they have hill toppers and all the other words that identify with a hill, because that university, like this one, had its origin on top of a hill. And it also has its origin as basically a normal school, and it's gone through the same kind of process. I was there as Vice President of Finance Administration and had the experiences of dealing with the legislature. My responsibility was governmental relations. When I went to Southwest Texas State, the funding for higher education in Texas is for our universities. About 85% of the funding is based upon formula, and the other 15% is based upon special items or things that you go and you request. When I went there, Southwest Texas was in the bottom quarter of the 36 institutions in special items and non-formula funding. Working with a number of people, with the legislators, with the community, with our staff, by the end of my tenure there, 8 years later, we were in the top quarter of funding. We received our very first research funded project, which was the Edwards Aquifer Research and Development Center, which was one that I was responsible for creating. We moved to the top of major repair and rehabilitation projects in the state. So I had those kind of experiences there. In addition, in Texas, as I mentioned, 85% of the funding is by formula. I was very active during all my time there in working with the state coordinating board and other groups. In fact, I served on more coordinating board and legislative committees developing and implementing formulas than anyone else. 3 of the 12 formulas I developed. And the development of the formulas, in one sense, you can say, well, my background is as a management scientist, and that's pretty easy stuff for someone who's basically quantitatively based. But developing formulas and funding formulas, the numbers is the easy part. That's the easy part. The hard part is that every time you develop one and you work to get it implemented, it actually is a consensus building project, because you start with a committee which has 10 or 12 people who have been kind of a blue ribbon panel that have been chosen from all over the state of 36 different institutions, and then you develop you have to get them to agree to the formula, and you have to do something. You have to be very open. You can't come with a hidden agenda. You have to be very open and work for something that's good for the institutions, and it's very fair. You get something developed with that particular group, then you have to sell it to the 18-member coordinating board, which are 18 prominent citizens from the state. Then you have to sell it, and part of that is selling it to 36 other institutions. Some of these institutions will be negatively impacted, while others will be helped by formulas. Well, I went through that process with 3 different sets of formulas, more than anyone else. So I had an extensive background in the formula funding for the state. In Texas, there is all institutions are funded by a constitutional construction fund. The construction fund funds all 36 under Article 7, Section 17 and 18 of the state constitution. When I went to Southwest Texas, one of the problems that the institution had is that it was the most crowded campus on the state. It had 69 square feet, assignable square feet per student, And and there wasn't money to build construction money because the Constitutional Construction Fund, which had been set up years before, discriminated against growth institutions, and this was the highest growth institution at the time. So it didn't have funding. And the second problem was that if we would have had funding, we didn't have the space to put the buildings because the campus was landlocked. On one of those issues, developing the Constitutional Construction Fund, I developed the first statement and proposal for changing the fund, and worked from then on with the Council of College Presidents, with the legislature and other people in a process that took about 5 or 6 years to finally get it through the legislature and then also to the voters of the state to approve it in a state referendum. And it changed the construction fund. When it was changed, Southwest Texas was the institution which received the most funding, not because the fund discriminated for Southwest Texas, but because Southwest Texas was the most needy institution. The other part of the project, the problem at Southwest Texas was land. And I worked with folks at San Marcos Baptist Academy, an academy that had been created in the 19th century that was right next to the campus, to develop a proposal where we bought their campus and they built a new campus in another location. And it added 30% more space to the campus, so now we had a place to expand to. That's kind of a very brief summary of some of the things that I have done in working with the legislature. Budgeting, I should say this, in 1974, when I was at the University of Texas at Dallas, I was asked to work with the Legislative Budget Office, work with them to develop a new budgeting process that was used by the state for all agencies. So I've had all of that bureaucratic experience in working with the bureaucracy, working with the state legislature, and working to develop the campuses.
This morning at the community breakfast, you were talking about some actions that a university would need to take. Briefly, I caught one of these was have students and their families pay for their fair share. Could you expand on that and tell me what you meant by that?
I think what I was talking, the part that I was talking about was resources for the campus. And there are a number of potential resources for the campus. One that is very, very important is fundraising, and that is fundraising from private gifts. And I've had a great deal of experience in that area, and I'll be happy to address that if someone wants to talk about it. Another important area that is the legislature and funding, and the legislature has stated that they're going to make a commitment to putting resources, making investments in higher education, which is critically important. It will have the same kind of impact on Kentucky that the GI Bill had on our country and bootstrapping it economically in our workforce after World War II. And one of the areas that you need to maintain a level of funding is the tuition and fees that are paid. Fortunately for Kentucky, like several other states, is that Kentucky is in the bottom quarter of cost per student. And so my comment there was I did not believe that the students and the parents, and speaking as a parent with 6 kids, all have gone through college, the parents will not be opposed to continuing to pay their fair share of the cost of an education as long as the institution demonstrates that the institution is a good steward of those funds.
One more question.
Well, 2 questions, if I may. You're unusual in the other 3 because you have gotten out of higher ed. Why did you get out of higher ed, and why do you want to get back into it? That's the first question.
Okay, I have made a transition to and from higher education a couple of times. The first time that when I finished my PhD, before I went back for my PhD work, I was working for DuPont in their corporate headquarters and had a great deal of industrial experience. I went back and taught. I received recognition, teaching award recognitions, and I attributed that to the fact that I was able to bring a lot of my business experience to the classroom, which most of my colleagues did not have that experience. When I finished my PhD, I determined that it really was important. I felt it was really important for me to continue an internship in business. And so even though I intended to be in higher education for my career, I went to work for Ross Perot. and which was a very interesting tour. And
What did you do for 'em?
a lot. Rossboro, I was a management consultant, essentially helping to solve problems of clients. At that time, the business at EDS was processing healthcare claims for Blue Cross firms all over the United States. We processed more healthcare claims than anybody else in the world. And the various clients had problems, and so I would go to the client's location and solve problems. I was recruited back into higher education, and it was an easy move for me to make, by Bryce Jordan, who was creating a brand new institution in Texas. It was the University of Texas decided they were going to have their own little MIT. And their own little MIT was going to be University of Texas at Dallas, which was going to be a research doctoral institution, prestigious institution, which would also build down to have graduate programs. When Dr. Jordan asked me to join him as planning officer, we had virtually nothing on campus. We built everything from scratch. It was an exciting, wonderful time of 7-day weeks, 14-hour days, building an institution, doing everything, putting together the academic programs, putting together how you even collect tuition payments, just everything, built in addition to planning a campus. From there, I went to Southwest Texas, which I've mentioned some of the work at Southwest Texas, and from there to Texas Tech University, which is one of the 4 doctoral and research institutions. I was in that role for 15 years. I enjoyed what I was doing. It was wonderful. But it had been 15 years, and I felt like I really needed a change, a sabbatical. In addition, at that time, as I think we've mentioned, we have 6 children. 3 or 4 at that time were in college. And I had a very attractive financial offer to go into industry, to use the same kind of things I was doing in higher education to help solve industrial problems. And that was 8 years ago. And so for those reasons, I left. And it has proven to be very good for me and for my family, me professionally and financially. But I have always had a commitment to and an interest in, strong interest. My life's work has been education, higher education. I've always known that. From the time that I went to work for Bryce Jordan in building the new campus at UT Dallas, I always kind of had a dream of what it would be like if I were able to use my experiences to lead a quality institution. So it's something I've always wanted to do.
My last question, or my second question is, what would be your role, Ms. Payne, as the wife of the president?
Jean and I have worked collaboratively at every institution. We met at Southwest Texas State University, and I've been working in higher education since 1972. I'm a development officer. I'm the assistant dean in the College of Fine Arts at UT Austin. And one of the things that I've noted at all of our assignments is the role of the president's wife. I think it's as the president's role becomes increasingly, the task becomes to secure additional outside resources to support the initiatives at the university. I think the president's wife plays an important role in that. I think in involvement with the community and service to the community, and entertainment and cultivation of prospective donors and friends for the university, and helping to build the team with the faculty and the staff and the students.
I might add that I'm proud of my fundraising background. I've participated in every area of fundraising, from developing proposals, from creating a foundation, to asking for the funds, to running organizations. And I think that's very important. And I'm also pleased to say that I was personally involved in raising at least $30 million. But then I have to say that is a very small amount, a very small task to what Karen has done, and the kind of programs that she has been responsible for in fundraising.